Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving straight into a situation that has literally sent shockwaves through India's educational landscape. We're going to be unpacking a highly impassioned address by Khan Sir from Khan Global Studies. He recently spoke out about the massive controversy surrounding the NEET 2026 paper leak, and let me tell you, this is a sprawling, intensely emotional issue that impacts millions of young medical hopefuls. Now, as always in this explainer, we're keeping things completely objective. We're just here to carefully examine and structure the intense claims, the systemic critiques, and frankly, the heartbreaking realities presented in the source material.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really wrap our heads around the sheer magnitude of this issue, we're going to break down the speaker's arguments into 5 distinct chronological sections. We've got the NEET 2026 cancellation, systemic failures and corruption, the severe human cost, the re-exam dilemma, and finally, support and proposed solutions.
All right, starting right off with Section 1, the NEET 2026 cancellation.
So, the foundational fact we need to start with is this. The NEET 2026 medical entrance exam was officially canceled after some undeniable evidence of widespread paper leaks came to light. For those unfamiliar, this isn't just any test. It is the ultimate gatekeeper exam for medical colleges in India. When an exam of this scale gets scrapped, it doesn't just make headlines, right? It completely shatters the academic timelines and immediate futures for millions of students who have spent years preparing for this exact moment. It's a pretty stark reminder of what happens when the very systems designed to test merit fundamentally break down.
And this brilliantly illustrates what Khan Sir sees as the supreme irony of the whole situation. Get this. It wasn't the NTA, the National Testing Agency, that caught this leak through some high-tech internal audit. Nope, it was the vigilant students themselves. The speaker points out this crazy sequence of events where students first discovered the leaked papers circulating wildly on Telegram and WhatsApp groups. Then they realized these questions were an exact match for tests being administered at a specific coaching center in Kerala. It was literally only because of a massive, undeniable student outcry that the NTA was ultimately forced to cancel the exam. The argument here is that without this massive public uproar, the authorities might have just swept it under the rug. Moving right along to Section 2, systemic failures and corruption.
Here, the source draws a really sharp contrast between what they call the paper mafia, wealthy, deeply connected individuals who buy the leaked papers, and your average student. The average student barely has the access or influence to book a train ticket, let alone mastermind a national exam leak. So the speaker argues that these two worlds don't just naturally interact. For a leak to actually reach the students, there has to be a corrupt bridge. And they specifically point the finger at compromised coaching centers, arguing that certain institutes sell out their integrity to act as these crucial middlemen, basically facilitating the transaction between the high-level paper mafia and the candidates.
And that brings us to a heavy critique of the authorities handling the crisis. The speaker expresses absolutely zero trust in the NTA, flat out calling them incompetent and wholly untrustworthy. But the skepticism doesn't stop there. Even handing the investigation over to the CBI, India's premier investigating agency, is viewed with a lot of cynicism. The speaker argues that these probes are notoriously slow. In fact, they note that by the time an investigation like this actually concludes, the culprits might have already finished their MBBS degrees. The source presents this chilling hypothetical. There is a genuine risk of unqualified fake doctors treating patients in top-tier government hospitals like AIIMS simply because they bought their way in.
Which leads us into the real emotional core of this explainer. Section 3, the severe human cost.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark, painful juxtaposition. On one side, you've got wealthy individuals buying exam papers for millions of rupees. On the other, the devastating on-the-ground reality for the average student. The speaker vividly describes kids traveling 100 to 400 kilometers in scorching, extreme heat just to reach their exam centers. They're hit with exploitative hotel prices that magically surge for exam weekends. Many who can't afford a room end up sleeping on railway platforms on cheap 20-rupee plastic sheets. And most heartbreakingly, to fund this education, parents are mortgaging their agricultural land and mothers are pawning their Mangal Sutras, their sacred marriage necklaces. It's a staggering financial and physical toll that completely gets ignored when a paper is leaked.
The source also gives this incredibly impassioned focus to the specific plight of female students. Because, as the speaker points out, for many girls in India, the failure or cancellation of this exam doesn't just mean a delayed year. It often means the end of the road. While boys might get a second chance, the speaker argues that countless girls will simply be forced into marriage as a result of this cancellation. Their dreams of wearing a white apron and carrying a stethoscope permanently replaced by a life of domestic chores. It's a profound loss of human potential that the speaker directly blames on the negligence of the testing authorities.
Let's pivot now to Section 4, the re-exam dilemma.
Let's move to the timeline here and see how this builds. To validate the immense psychological terror students are feeling right now about the upcoming re-exam, the speaker leans on history. They trace this dark timeline of major paper leaks in India. You've got the IIT JEE back in 1997, the AIPMT in 2015, the recent NEET leak in 2024, and now, of course, this 2026 disaster.
And the crucial takeaway the speaker draws from this history is that examining bodies have a habit of making the subsequent re-exams punitively, almost impossibly difficult. The speaker puts forward this theory that it's almost done out of revenge or spite, like the authorities are punishing the students for exposing the leak in the first place. Because of this, even the top-tier students, the ones who were comfortably scoring perfect or near-perfect marks before the cancellation, are terrified. They're gripped by this intense psychological dread that a punishingly tough re-exam is going to completely destroy their hard-earned ranks.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Support and Proposed Solutions.
To ensure a disaster like this never happens again, the speaker lays out some very specific, high-level demands for government action. First up, they argue that the NTA has completely lost its mandate and needs to be entirely disbanded. Second, they demand the investigation be taken away from standard agencies and placed under a dedicated inquiry commission led by a bench of retired Supreme Court judges. And finally, to guarantee absolute transparency and accountability, they insist this new body must report directly to the Prime Minister's office.
So the crucial point is, what does this number 0 actually represent? Well, it represents the cost of Khan Global Studies' upcoming NEET re-exam test series. Right in the middle of all this heavy systemic critique, the speaker makes a deeply personal pledge to the students. Acknowledging the immense financial and psychological burden these kids are under, Khan Sir announces that his institution is going to provide comprehensive offline and online test series, along with full discussion sessions, completely free of charge. It's a localized grassroots effort to support students academically and financially through an incredibly dark and uncertain period. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've traced the timeline of the leak, unpacked the deep-seated allegations of corruption bridging the paper mafia to the exam halls, looked at the devastating human toll on impoverished families, and explored the sheer terror of the looming re-exam. The source leaves us with a stark reality. Millions of futures are currently hanging in the balance. It really begs a larger question for all of us about the systems we place our trust in. Will the government actually implement the massive systemic reforms demanded to secure these futures, or are we simply waiting for history to repeat itself? Keep an eye on this story, stay informed, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.